The afternoon sun blazed down on the busy city street, making the sidewalk shimmer with heat. Cars honked impatiently. People hurried by, lost in their own worlds, and in the midst of it all sat an old man, his dark skin weathered by time, his clothes a little worn but clean. He rested on the edge of a bench outside an upscale restaurant, his eyes calm, observing the world around him. Every now and then, a passerby would glance at him, some with pity, others with judgment, and a few with outright disdain. "Here, sir, get yourself something to eat." A woman, perhaps in her late 30s, dressed in designer clothes, dropped a couple of dollars into his lap before striding off without waiting for a response. The man looked down at the money, sighed, and tucked it into his pocket, not out of need, but out of habit. It wasn't the first time someone had mistaken him for a beggar, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. Inside the restaurant, a well-dressed manager stood near the window, arms crossed, watching the man outside with growing irritation. His restaurant was known for its exclusivity, a place where the city's wealthy and famous dined in luxury. He didn't like the sight of someone sitting outside, especially someone who, in his mind, might deter customers. He whispered to one of the waiters, nodding toward the man, "Go and tell him to move along. We don't need people thinking we allow loitering." The young waiter hesitated, looking at the man outside. "But he's not really bothering anyone." The manager's face hardened. "Do it." With a nervous nod, the waiter stepped outside, walking up to the man. Sir, I'm really sorry, but my manager says you can't sit here. It's private property." The man didn't react right away. He simply exhaled, slow and deep, before looking up at the young waiter. His eyes were sharp, intelligent, more alert than one might expect. But then, as if deciding it wasn't worth an argument, he stood up. "All right," he said, his voice deep and smooth. "I wouldn't want to be where I'm not welcome." He turned to leave, but just as he did, something happened that neither the waiter nor the manager inside expected. A wealthy businessman, dressed in a sharp navy suit, stepped out of a luxury car that had just pulled up. His eyes scanned the restaurant's entrance, then widened in shock when he spotted the man who had just been asked to leave. "Chef Raymond," the businessman called out, his voice filled with disbelief. The man stopped, slowly turning to face him. There was a flicker of recognition in his expression, followed by a small knowing smile. "Mr. Davis," he replied with a nod. The businessman laughed, shaking his head in astonishment. "I can't believe this. What are you doing here? Everyone's been looking for you." The manager, still standing at the window, frowned in confusion. "Wait." "Chef Raymond." He turned to a nearby hostess. "Did he just say chef?" The hostess nodded slowly, just as stunned. The businessman grinned and clapped the man on the shoulder. "Come inside with me. I've got something important to discuss with you." And just like that, the man who had been mistaken for a beggar just moments ago was suddenly being treated like a VIP. But who was he really? And why was someone like him being sought after by the wealthy elite? As they stepped inside, the manager could feel the eyes of his staff on him. He had just kicked out someone who was apparently important, very important. But why? What was his story? And more importantly, what would happen next? The restaurant fell into an uneasy silence as Chef Raymond stepped inside, his presence now drawing curious stares from the staff and diners alike. The businessman, Mr. Davis, led him toward a corner booth, his expression filled with excitement and urgency. The manager, still standing frozen near the entrance, felt his stomach tighten. Just minutes ago, he had dismissed this man, assuming he was just another homeless drifter. Now, Whispers were spreading through the staff. Who was he really? And why did a man like Mr. Davis, a known investor, treat him with such respect? Raymond sat down, his movements calm and deliberate. He had been in places like this before. Restaurants draped in luxury, filled with people who never questioned their place in the world. But he wasn't here to judge. He had lived many lives, and right now, he was more interested in hearing what Mr. Davis had to say. The businessman leaned forward, lowering his voice. "Raymond, you disappeared. No one's heard from you in years. We thought you had left the culinary world for good." Raymond gave a small smile, the kind that carried years of unspoken stories. "Guess I needed some time." "Time?" Mr. Davis shook his head, still in disbelief. "You were one of the greatest chefs this city had ever seen. Michelin stars, international recognition. Then one day, you just vanished. No explanations, no goodbyes. Now I find you sitting outside a restaurant like—" He hesitated, catching himself before saying something insensitive. "Like a man down on his luck." Raymond finished for him, his tone light, but his eyes sharp. Mr. Davis exhaled. "I didn't mean it like that. It's fine." Raymond leaned back, glancing around the restaurant. The scent of fresh herbs and seared meats filled the air, but he wasn't impressed. "I didn't disappear, Davis. I just walked away." The businessman frowned. "But why? You had everything. Fame, fortune, respect." Raymond's fingers tapped lightly on the table. "Everything, except peace." He let the words settle before continuing. "You know, when I first started cooking, it was about the food, the craft, the joy of seeing someone take that first bite and watching their eyes light up." He paused. "Then came the critics, the expectations, the pressure to be more than just a chef, to be a brand. I started cooking for awards instead of people. And one day, I woke up and realized I didn't love it anymore." Mr. Davis listened carefully. He had seen the industry chew people up and spit them out, but Raymond had been different. He had a gift, something beyond technique or skill. His food had soul. "So, what now?" Davis finally asked. "You just sit outside restaurants and let people assume you're a beggar?" Raymond chuckled. "I sit where I want. People assume what they want. That's not my concern." Davis shook his head, a knowing look in his eyes. "I think you miss it." Raymond didn't answer right away. Maybe he did. Maybe there was still a part of him that longed for the fire of the kitchen, the thrill of creating something unforgettable. But was it worth stepping back into the world he had left behind? Before he could respond, a sharp voice interrupted. "Excuse me, sir." Raymond and Mr. Davis turned to see the restaurant manager standing there, his expression uneasy, but forced into something that resembled politeness. I'd like to apologize for earlier. I didn't realize who you were." Raymond studied, him amused. "And who am I?" The manager hesitated. He didn't have an answer. He only knew that he had made a mistake, and now he was trying to undo it. "I just wanted to say that you're welcome here. If there's anything I can do to make your visit more comfortable." Raymond raised a hand, cutting him off gently. "No need. I wasn't planning on staying long." The manager nodded stiffly and retreated, but the tension in the air remained. The encounter wasn't lost on Davis, who sighed. People judge too quickly. Raymond shrugged. That's human nature. Davis leaned forward again, more serious now. "Listen, Raymond, I didn't just run into you by coincidence. I came here today because I'm opening a new restaurant. I need a head chef, someone who understands real food, real flavor." He searched Raymond's face. "Come back, just for one night. Show them who you really are." Raymond looked down at his hands, calloused from years of work, from holding knives and shaping flavors. Could he really step back into that world? Did he even want to? For the first time in years, he wasn't sure. And that uncertainty meant only one thing. He had to find out. Raymond sat in silence for a moment, Davis's words hanging in the air. Between them, he had spent years running from the life he once knew, convincing himself that he was done with the industry, that he had nothing left to prove. And yet, here he was, being offered a chance to step back into the fire, not for awards, not for fame, just for the love of cooking. He exhaled slowly. One night, that's all. Davis grinned, knowing this was more than just a single night. It was a door opening again. That's all I need. The next evening, Raymond stepped into the gleaming kitchen of Davis's new restaurant. The staff barely noticed him at first, too busy in the dinner rush to pay attention to a man in a plain white chef's coat. The executive chef, a younger man with a sharp demeanor, raised an eyebrow when Davis introduced Raymond as a guest chef for the night. "This is your guy?" he asked skeptically. Davis just smiled. "Watch and see." Raymond didn't need to announce himself. He moved through the kitchen like he had never left, checking ingredients, feeling the energy of the room. The chefs around him worked fast, their hands steady, but there was something missing, a rhythm, a soul. Then he took over the line. At first, the other chefs were hesitant, unsure of how to respond to this quiet man who had appeared out of nowhere. But the moment he began cooking, everything changed. His hands moved with precision, his movements smooth, controlled. He wasn't just following recipes. He was creating something alive. The first plate left the pass, then another, and another. The dining room began to buzz. As guests tasted his dishes, the whispers started, then turned into murmurs of excitement. "Who made this? This is the best dish I've ever had." Even the kitchen staff couldn't deny it. There was something special happening. The executive chef, who had doubted him just moments before, stood back, watching in quiet disbelief. Davis leaned against the doorway, smiling to himself. He had been right. Raymond hadn't lost it. If anything, he was better than ever. And then, the restaurant manager from the night before walked in. The moment he spotted Raymond behind the line, his face drained of color. He had spent years making quick judgments about people, deciding who belonged and who didn't. And now, the very man he had dismissed was the reason his restaurant was buzzing with excitement. Raymond caught his eye, but there was no anger in his expression, just understanding. He had dealt with people like this all his life. He didn't need an apology. The food spoke for itself. As the last dish was plated, Raymond stepped back, wiping his hands on his apron. The kitchen had fallen into an odd silence. Every chef watching, him, waiting for what he would say. He looked around at them, at the young cooks with fire in their eyes, at the executive chef who now regarded him with a quiet respect. "Cooking isn't about impressing people," Raymond said finally. "It's about giving them something real, something they'll remember." Davis clapped him on the back. "So? One night. Was it enough?" Raymond smirked. "Maybe not." The next day, news spread. A legendary chef had returned, not for fame, not for fortune, but simply to cook. The restaurant world buzzed with rumors. Who was he? Where had he been? And more importantly, what would he do next? Raymond didn't have all the answers yet, but for the first time in years, he was ready to find out.